The storm had passed, but its devastating effects remained throughout the small village of San Roque in the Philippines. The sky, once furious, now opened into an almost offensive clear blue in the face of so much destruction. Among the rubble of what was once an elementary school, an elderly woman with gray hair and a wrinkled face searched with trembling hands, looking for anything that could be salvaged. Her name was Lena Reyes, and for 40 years she had been a teacher at that same school. Now, at 72, she still came every day to guide the younger teachers. The school was her life, and seeing it destroyed was like losing a part of herself. Her silent tears mixed with the mud as she collected soaked books and damaged photographs. The typhoon had been the worst in decades. The concrete walls that once housed the dreams of hundreds of children were now nothing but rubble. The roof had completely disappeared, carried away by the relentless winds that exceeded 120 miles per hour. Desks were scattered everywhere, some found miles away. Lena found a framed photo, now with broken glass, of the first class she taught in 1980. She carefully cleaned off the mud and placed it in her cloth bag. Those smiling children now had their own children, some even grandchildren, and many still lived in that same community. Her mind wandered between memories of children's laughter and graduation celebrations. A man approached, wearing simple clothes and a straw hat that protected his face from the merciless sun now punishing the village after the storm. He observed the elderly woman for a few moments before approaching to help her collect the soaked books. He had calloused hands and a face that, despite its apparent youth, carried marks of someone who knew the weight of hard work. Lena noticed the man's presence but continued her work. In the days following the disaster, many strangers roamed the village: humanitarian workers, journalists, curious onlookers. She had already spoken to dozens of them, always repeating the same sad story of loss and destruction. She was tired of empty words and promises that would never materialize. The stranger helped Lena collect school materials for almost an hour, in respectful silence. There was something familiar about him, a presence that conveyed calm and determination at the same time. His hands moved with purpose, separating what could still be used from what was irretrievably lost. He asked no questions, just worked. The afternoon advanced, and the heat became unbearable. Lena felt a sudden dizziness, the result of exhaustion and dehydration. Her legs would have given way had the stranger not quickly supported her. Gently, he led her to the shade of a surviving tree and offered her water from his canteen. The man looked at the destruction around him, and his eyes reflected a deep sadness, but also a silent determination. Lena realized he wasn't just another curious onlooker. There was purpose in his presence there, as if he were assessing the situation not out of curiosity, but to understand what needed to be done. At that moment, a small child ran toward the stranger, his eyes shining with a recognition that Lena did not share. The boy, approximately 10 years old, excitedly pointed at the man, pulling the sleeve of his mother who was following close behind. It was then that the truth hit Lena like a wave. The stranger helping her wasn't just any unknown person. Manny Pacquiao had grown up in circumstances not much different from the children of San Roque. Born into extreme poverty, he knew well the taste of hunger and the feeling of sleeping on a dirt floor. His childhood in General Santos City had been marked by deprivations that shaped his character and determination. Those memories never left him, even after becoming one of the highest-paid boxers in the world. At 16, he had left home with nothing but dreams and fierce determination. Boxing wasn't just a sport, but his only chance to escape the poverty that had imprisoned his family for generations. Every fight, every punch was motivated by the desire to create a different future. There was no plan B in his mind. He needed to win. And win he did. From strawweight to middleweight, he conquered titles in 8 different weight classes, a feat never before accomplished in boxing history. His name became synonymous with speed, technique, and unmatched willpower. Pacquiao wasn't just a boxer. He was a phenomenon, a national symbol, the personification of the Filipino dream. Fame came with wealth. Mansions, luxury cars, private jets. Nothing seemed impossible now. The boy who once went hungry could now buy anything he desired. The bright lights of Las Vegas, multi-million-dollar contracts, exclusive parties became his new reality. But Manny's heart never forgot his origins. Between multi-million-dollar fights, he observed his country with different eyes. He saw in the barefoot children of remote villages the reflection of his own past. He saw in the improvised schools the same ones where he had briefly studied before necessity forced him to abandon his studies to work and help his family. Politics called to him as a natural extension of his desire to make a difference. He became a congressman, then a senator. His speeches, though simple, resonated with authenticity. He spoke of people's real needs because he knew them intimately, not from books or reports. He promised changes because he knew exactly what needed to be changed. But it was in his private life, away from the spotlight, that Manny found his greatest purpose. He began buying land and building homes for homeless families. He financed scholarships for promising young people who, like him in the past, had no means to pursue their dreams. He built schools, hospitals, community centers. He did it all without fanfare, often visiting projects incognito. His wife sometimes questioned the need for such anonymity. After all, his fame could attract more donations, more support. But Manny insisted that true charity did not seek recognition. In his most sincere moments, he confessed that these secret visits nourished him much more than any applause from crowds in packed arenas. The typhoon that hit the Philippines that week had been particularly devastating. Manny watched the news in his Manila mansion, feeling the powerlessness that not even all his wealth could dispel. Decisions were made, donations given, aid sent. But something deeply bothered him, an inner voice saying that money sent was not the same as hands extended. The next morning, to the surprise of his advisors, Manny cancelled all his commitments for the coming weeks. He dressed simply, took his old straw hat, and drove alone to the most affected areas. Not as a senator, not as a celebrity, just as a Filipino who wanted to help other Filipinos in their time of need. Lina Reyes felt her heart race as she recognized Manny Pacquiao. In the small village of San Roque, as everywhere in the Philippines, he was a living legend. His image adorned calendars, T-shirts, even makeshift shrines in some homes. But here he was, covered in dust and sweat, helping her collect ruined books without seeking recognition or gratitude. News spread quickly through the community. Soon, a small group of residents formed at a respectful distance, watching with admiration and curiosity. Manny seemed oblivious to the attention, focused on his conversation with the elderly teacher. His gestures were gentle, his posture relaxed, as if he were just another anonymous volunteer. That night, Manny refused special accommodations and joined the rescue workers in a makeshift camp. He ate the same simple rice with dried fish, slept on the same hard ground, woke to the same rooster calls in the early hours of the morning. The younger volunteers observed him with barely contained admiration, finding new energy in his presence. At dawn on the second day, Manny met with the local community council. He made no grand speeches or extravagant promises. He listened attentively as leaders explained the extent of the damage and the most urgent needs. The school, they emphasized, was more than a building. It was the heart of the community, the future of the next generations. Manny walked again among the school's rubble, this time accompanied by Lina and some council members. He observed every detail, asked specific questions about the previous structure, the number of students, educational needs. His gaze was not that of a politician assessing damage, but of someone imagining possibilities. On his phone, Manny showed photos of other schools his foundation had built in remote communities. They weren't basic structures, but modern facilities with science labs, well-equipped libraries, sports courts. The counselor's eyes shone with hope, but also with skepticism. Surely San Roque was too small, too remote to deserve such an investment. The decision was made without fanfare or ceremony. Manny didn't make a formal announcement, didn't call the press, didn't turn the moment into a political opportunity. Instead, he simply informed the council that his foundation would rebuild the school, not just restoring what was there before, but creating something that would surpass anything the village had ever imagined possible. The project would begin immediately. Engineers, architects, and builders would arrive the following week. Meanwhile, temporary classrooms would be established in tents so that children's education would not be interrupted. Every detail had been considered, every need anticipated. It wasn't an impulsive gesture, but a carefully crafted plan by someone who understood the transformative power of education. The only condition Manny imposed surprised everyone. The school would not bear his name. There would be no commemorative plaques with his image, no inauguration ceremonies with his presence. The school would belong to the community, not to his legend. His involvement would remain discreet, almost secret, known only to those present that day. Before leaving, Manny had one last private conversation with Lena. The elderly teacher, who had dedicated her life to education in that community, would be consulted at every stage of the project. Her years of experience and deep knowledge of local needs would be honored and valued. It wasn't just a building being rebuilt, but a legacy. The following days brought a surprising transformation to San Roque. What was once a scene of destruction became a bustling construction site. Excavators removed debris, trucks brought building materials, engineers with clipboards traced lines in the air, visualizing the future that would emerge from the wreckage. Lena observed everything closely, her heart divided between hope and skepticism. Promises had been made before. Projects started with great enthusiasm, only to be abandoned when cameras left and public interest waned. Was this just another false hope for her already battered community? The workers hired were not strangers, but people from the community itself and neighboring villages. Manny's foundation insisted that, whenever possible, local labor be employed, not only to inject money into the devastated economy, but to give residents a sense of ownership over the project. Carpenters, masons, electricians, all received additional training when necessary. The temporary classroom tents emerged first, equipped with new boards, books, notebooks, and all necessary materials. Children who had lost everything in the disaster received backpacks with complete school supplies. New uniforms were distributed, each with a child's name carefully embroidered, a personal touch that brought tears to many parents' eyes. Weekly, detailed reports reached Manny's email, keeping him informed of progress. Although he did not personally return to San Roque, his presence was felt in every decision made, in every detail considered. When obstacles arose, solutions appeared almost immediately, without bureaucracy or delays. Classes resumed in the temporary facilities. Lena, despite her advanced age, insisted on returning to teaching. There was something therapeutic about being among the children again, in establishing a routine amid the chaos. She taught them not just about letters and numbers, but about resilience, about rebuilding from nothing. At night, the village gathered to share community meals. Conversations, previously centered on tragedy and losses, began to include plans for the future. Hope, that fragile and precious force, began to blossom again in hearts that had known too much disillusionment. 3 months passed. The basic structure of the new school was already visible. Larger, more robust, and more modern than before. Engineers explained that the new design would withstand future typhoons, with advanced materials and construction techniques. It wasn't just a replacement, but an evolution, a symbol of adaptation and perseverance. Some journalists finally discovered the connection between Manny Pacquiao and the project in San Roque. They arrived with cameras and microphones, eager to turn the story into sensational headlines. The residents, however, proved surprisingly reserved. Respecting Manny's wish for discretion, they shared only minimal information, protecting the integrity of the gesture. In Manila, Manny's life continued at its usual pace. Political commitments, public appearances, training. Nothing in his behavior indicated the significant project he was financing in a remote village. When questioned by reporters about his humanitarian efforts after the typhoon, he mentioned only the official donations made through public channels, never the San Roque school. 6 months after the typhoon, the new school was almost complete. The main building, with its robust walls painted in vibrant colors, housed 12 spacious classrooms. A science laboratory equipped with modern technology occupied the east wing, while a library with thousands of new books filled the west wing. In the center, an open courtyard with well-tended gardens offered a space for community meetings and outdoor activities. What most surprised the community was the multi-sports gymnasium. Besides a complete court for basketball and volleyball, it featured professional boxing equipment, punching bags, a training ring, gloves of various categories. It was a silent invitation for the young people of San Roque to dream beyond the limits of their small village. As the inauguration date approached, growing curiosity took hold of the community. Who would cut the ribbon? Would there be a formal ceremony? Would Manny Pacquiao be present to receive well-deserved thanks? The foundation remained evasive about these details, creating an air of mystery that fueled speculation. A week before the scheduled inauguration, a helicopter landed in a field near the village. From it descended not Manny Pacquiao, but his wife, Jean Key, accompanied by a small team. Without prior notice, she requested a private meeting with Lina Reyes and the local community council. The meeting lasted hours, and its content remained confidential. The next day, design teams arrived at the school. They worked in an isolated area, sealed off by tarps that prevented any visibility. Security guards were positioned, ensuring that no one approached to satisfy the growing curiosity. The mystery only intensified the buzz in the village, with increasingly elaborate theories emerging with each shared meal. Finally, on the eve of the inauguration, the tarps were removed, revealing a surprise that left the community in respectful silence. It was not Manny Pacquiao's name that adorned the school entrance, but a simple and elegant plaque. Teacher Lina Reyes School, educating champions since 1980. Lina, who had been purposely kept away during the final preparations, fell to her knees upon seeing her name. Tears flowed freely down her wrinkled face as gentle hands supported her. Her entire life dedicated to education, decades of silent sacrifice, were being recognized in a way she had never imagined possible. The inauguration ceremony was intentionally small and intimate. There were no important politicians, celebrities, or national press. Just the community, gathered to celebrate not just a new building, but a collective rebirth. Lina, trembling with emotion, was invited to cut the ribbon, officially opening the doors to San Roque's future. The true purpose of Jinky's visit became clear only during the opening speech. With elegance and sincerity, she explained that her husband could not be present not out of disinterest, but out of respect. The school wasn't about him or his generosity. It was about the community, about Lina, about the transformative power of education. Jean Key then revealed that, beyond construction, the foundation had established a perpetual fund for school maintenance, ensuring resources would never be lacking for repairs, equipment, or materials. Additionally, 20 full university scholarships would be offered annually to the most dedicated graduates, removing the financial barriers that typically prevented talented young people from remote villages from accessing higher education. On a large screen set up in the gymnasium, Manny appeared in a recorded message. He spoke not as a celebrity or politician, but as a son of the Philippines who intimately knew the value of the education he himself couldn't complete. Without mentioning his own role in the project, he focused on celebrating the community's resilience and particularly the dedication of Lina Reyes, whom he referred to as the true champion of San Roque. At the end of the ceremony, each family received a simple box containing a personal letter from Manny and Jean Key, a framed photograph of the new school, and a small silver locket. Inside each locket was a fragment from the rubble of the old school, preserved as a reminder that even from the greatest destruction, new beginnings can emerge. The months following the inauguration brought renewed normalcy to San Roque. Children ran through the bright corridors of the school, their voices echoing in the central courtyard. Teachers, now equipped with resources they had never dreamed of having access to, rediscovered their passion for teaching. The entire community seemed to breathe with a new rhythm, a pulse of possibilities that was previously absent. The science laboratory quickly became the beating heart of the school. Children who had never seen a microscope now conducted complex experiments, their eyes shining with the magic of discovery. A biology teacher reported, emotionally, that several students had begun expressing interest in medical careers, dreams that previously seemed completely out of reach. In the library, shelves full of new books invited endless explorations. Lina established a reading club that met on Saturdays, attracting not only children but also adults from the community. Many parents, with limited formal education, found themselves learning alongside their children, filling knowledge gaps that hard life had left behind. The gymnasium, with its professional boxing equipment, became a magnet for young people after school hours. A structured program was developed, combining physical training with values such as discipline, respect, and perseverance. It wasn't about creating future professional boxers, but offering a constructive outlet and teaching life lessons through sport. Periodically, professional trainers visited the gymnasium, offering specialized clinics. Though never officially announced, local residents recognized these specialists as members of Manny Pacquiao's technical team. They came discreetly, shared their knowledge, and departed without fanfare, keeping the promise of anonymity that characterized the entire project. Lina, despite her advanced age, found new energy in her role as honorary director of the school. Her routine now included meetings with educators from various parts of the country who visited to learn about the educational model developed in San Roque. What had begun as a reconstruction project was silently transforming into a center of educational excellence. Perhaps the most profound impact, however, was on the community's aspirations. Parents who previously advised their children to seek early employment now talked about universities. Young people who had accepted as inevitable a future limited to local opportunities began to imagine possibilities beyond the limits of San Roque. Hope, that precious commodity, had been restored. In Manila, Manny Pacquiao continued his public life without ever specifically mentioning his involvement with San Roque. When questioned about philanthropy, he spoke in general terms about social responsibility and the importance of giving back. The only indication of his ongoing connection to the project was a framed photograph in his personal office, the school seen from a distance, with no visible identification. Jean Key, however, maintained regular contact with Lina, exchanging weekly emails about the school's progress. This communication established an unexpected bridge between two women from completely different worlds, united by a shared commitment to education and children's future. A genuine friendship blossomed, transcending social and economic barriers. The story of the San Roque school remained relatively unknown nationally. When mentioned in some report, it was celebrated as an example of community resilience, with little or no reference to Pacquiao Foundation's funding. This discretion, far from diminishing the project's impact, only reinforced its authenticity and true purpose. 1 year after the school's inauguration, Lena Reyes received a call that would again change the course of her life. On the other end of the line, Manny Pacquiao's familiar voice invited her to a meeting in Manila, without explaining the purpose beyond mentioning that it was an important opportunity. All expenses would be covered, and a car would wait for her the next morning. For Lena, who had rarely left San Roque in recent decades, the trip to Manila was an intimidating adventure. The bustling capital with its skyscrapers, intense traffic, and hurried crowds seemed a completely different world from her quiet village. The driver guided her through the urban chaos to an elegant but discreet building in the business district. At the Pacquiao Foundation office, Lena was greeted not only by Manny, but by Manny himself. It was the first time she had seen him since those initial days after the typhoon, when he had anonymously helped collect books among the rubble. Now, in his environment, he seemed simultaneously larger and more accessible, a contradiction that only people of genuine humility can embody. The meeting began with updates about the school. Manny listened attentively as Lena shared transformation stories. The shy boy who had discovered a passion for science, the girl who dreamed of becoming a doctor, the significant increase in national assessment scores. His interest was genuine, asking specific questions that demonstrated detailed knowledge of the project. Then, with characteristic gentleness, Manny and Manny presented the true reason for the invitation. The foundation was preparing to launch a national education initiative, 100 schools in vulnerable communities throughout the Philippine archipelago, all following the model developed in San Roque. They would like Lena to assume a central role as an educational consultant for the project. The proposal left Lena speechless. At 73, when many would seek only well-deserved rest, she was being invited on a completely new journey. The project would mean frequent travel, meetings with educational authorities, teacher training, responsibilities that seemed disproportionate for someone who had spent her entire life in a small rural school. Sensing her hesitation, Manny shared something unexpected. During the construction months of the San Roque school, he had requested detailed reports not only on physical progress, but on the educational methodologies Lena implemented even in the provisional classrooms. Education experts, analyzing these reports, had been impressed with her intuitive approach that combined academic rigor with socio-emotional development. Manny added that the San Roque school wasn't just a charity project, but a laboratory for understanding what really worked in rural Filipino education. The preliminary results, significant improvement in academic performance, reduced dropout rates, increased community involvement, validated the approach and justified its national expansion. Lena felt the weight of responsibility, but also the warmth of recognition she had never sought. Her entire life dedicated to education, decades of silent work in a small, forgotten community, was now seen as a valuable model, worthy of replication on a national scale. It was a validation that transcended any formal title or award. Before she could respond, Manny made an observation that deeply touched her heart. He shared that his own formal education had been prematurely interrupted by extreme poverty, a common circumstance in communities like San Roque. The 100 Schools project wasn't just about building structures, but about breaking cycles of limitation that he knew intimately. That moment created a deep connection between the world-famous boxer and the elderly teacher. Despite radically different lives, they shared a visceral understanding of the transformative power of education and the real barriers that prevent its access. It wasn't charity that motivated the project, but a shared vision of social justice. Lena accepted the challenge, not with the impulsiveness of youth, but with the serenity of one who understands the value of each opportunity. Through contained tears, she thanked them for the trust placed in her simple methodologies, developed not in prestigious universities, but in the daily trenches of rural teaching. She promised to dedicate her remaining years to ensuring that children in remote villages had access to transformative education. The journey back to San Roque was quiet, with Lena absorbing the magnitude of what she had just accepted. The landscapes passing by the car window, from Manila's congested avenues to rural roads full of potholes, seemed to perfectly symbolize the inequalities the project sought to diminish. Each mile traveled strengthened her determination. Upon sharing the news with the San Roque community, Lena found not just support, but a wave of collective pride. The small village, previously known only for the damage suffered in the typhoon, would now be the model for a national educational transformation. Residents offered to take on extra responsibilities at the local school, freeing Lena for her new mission. In the following weeks, a team from the Pacquiao Foundation temporarily installed themselves in San Roque, meticulously documenting every aspect of the educational model. They filmed classes, interviewed teachers and parents, analyzed curricular plans. The tacit knowledge Lena had accumulated over decades of practice needed to be captured and systematized to be replicable in other contexts. A special room was designated at the school for Lena's new role. Equipped with modern communication technology, it allowed her to participate in virtual meetings and guide teachers in distant locations without needing to constantly travel. For someone who had spent her life writing on blackboards with chalk, adapting to video conferences and digital presentations was challenging, but stimulating. 2 years passed. The 100 Schools project advanced at a steady pace, with 27 units already inaugurated and functioning. Each carried the name of a respected local educator, following the model established in San Roque. None bore the Pacquiao name, although the architectural style and boxing equipment in the gymnasiums were silent signatures of his involvement. Lena, now 75, divided her time between her beloved school in San Roque and travels to train educators across the archipelago. Her energy seemed inexhaustible, fueled by the renewed purpose she had found. Young teachers sought her guidance, educational authorities requested her input for national policies, universities invited her for lectures. The original school in San Roque had become a kind of pilgrimage site for educators. Regular visitors marveled not only at the impressive physical structure, but at the vibrant atmosphere of learning and community. The first classes graduated from the new school showed extraordinary results, with many students securing the coveted university scholarships. On an ordinary morning, Lena was conducting an orientation session for new teachers when she felt a sudden dizziness. Her words became confused, her vision blurred. A silent and sudden stroke ended her life in the same way she had lived, in service, sharing knowledge, building the future. News of her passing spread quickly, first in San Roque, then throughout the country. Messages of condolence arrived from all schools in the project, from educational authorities, from former students scattered around the world. The small rural teacher, who had never sought recognition, unexpectedly became a national symbol of educational dedication. The funeral, following Lena's expressed wishes in her simple will, was to be a modest ceremony in the village church. However, the small structure could not accommodate all who wished to pay their last respects. The solution emerged naturally. The school gymnasium, the largest space available, was transformed for the occasion. On the day of the funeral, a surprise awaited the community. Manny Pacquiao, contrary to his own protocol of discretion, personally arrived for the ceremony. Not as a senator or celebrity, but as a son of the Philippines honoring an educator who had embodied the best values of his people. He dressed simply, without entourage or security, respectfully blending with the crowd. During the ceremony, various speakers shared memories of Lena, former students, fellow teachers, community members. When his turn came, Manny walked to the podium with a humility that silenced the assembly. His speech, brief and emotional, surprised everyone with an unexpected revelation. Manny shared that his own grandmother had been a teacher in a remote village, dedicating her life to children who, like young Pacquiao, had more dreams than opportunities. She had passed away while he was still struggling for daily survival, before he could repay all she had sacrificed. The San Roque School, he explained with a choked voice, wasn't just a charity project. It was a personal debt, a belated tribute to his grandmother through another extraordinary educator that Lena had been. The revelation brought a new dimension to the story the community knew. The anonymous gesture, the insistence on placing Lena's name on the school, the continued investment in the educational project. Everything gained a deeper and more personal meaning. It wasn't just philanthropy, but a genuine emotional connection that had motivated the world boxing champion. After the ceremony, Manny announced 2 initiatives in Lena's memory. First, the project would be expanded to 200 schools, not just 100 as initially planned. Second, a university specializing in teacher training would be established in San Roque, offering free education to young people who committed to teaching in rural communities for at least 5 years after graduation. In the years that followed, the vision shared by Lena and Manny continued to materialize throughout the Philippines. The project schools became centers of excellence, raising educational standards in historically neglected areas. The teacher training university attracted talents not just from the Philippines, but from the entire Southeast Asian region. The small village of San Roque, once known only for the destruction caused by a typhoon, transformed into a symbol of educational rebirth. Tourists and educators from around the world visited the educational complex that had grown from that first school. At the center of the campus, a simple but dignified statue showed Lena Reyes sitting on a bench, an open book in her lap, her wrinkled face eternalized in a gentle smile. Manny Pacquiao, throughout his remarkable career, conquered world titles in 8 different weight classes, an unprecedented feat in boxing. He gained and lost fortunes, influenced national politics, became a living legend. But among his many achievements, the educational legacy that began with an unexpected encounter after a typhoon may have been his most significant and enduring victory. The story of the San Roque School became part of Filipino folklore, passed from generation to generation as a reminder that true champions are not measured by the titles they win, but by the lives they transform. And that sometimes, the greatest impact comes not from grand gestures under spotlights, but from hands extended in moments of need, when no one is watching. On the walls of Manny Pacquiao's personal office in Manila, among the many titles and recognitions of his extraordinary career, a simple framed drawing occupied a prominent position. Made by a child from the first class graduated from the new San Roque School, it showed an elderly woman with gray hair and a man with boxing gloves, side by side, building an edifice made of books. Below, in childish handwriting, a simple inscription, "Our true champions." It was, perhaps, the title Manny was most proud of. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.